What's up, guys? How are you doing today? We're going to be looking at Illustrator again. You've probably seen there's another kind of long, in-depth video that's tied in with After Effects. So this is going to be more just on the basics and try to break this down into some smaller pieces. So this is just going to focus on the interface and kind of navigating, and in the next video we will look at actually starting to build some stuff. So let's bring up Illustrator here. Now, first thing you'll get when you open it is you'll get this create new and open, and I'm just going to create new here. Now, with Illustrator, you can make things for digital formats, and you can also make things for print formats, but that will change the color and the unit settings that you end up with in your document. Now, if we go to like mobile, for instance, you'll see we've got pixel units, pixels are default, and we also get RGB color and raster effects are going to be at a 72 ppi resolution. Whereas if we go over here to print, we're going to get a 300 ppi raster effects, which is much higher pixel density for print, but we're going to be using CMYK color, which is a much smaller color space than RGB colors. This is the way printers are going to print, and because it's a subtractive process, it's just not going to give you as many colors as something that's digital. So if you're making something for multiple purposes, I'd always recommend starting with a digital, like an RGB preset, and then you can always convert down to CMYK. But if you try to convert up to from CMYK to RGB, it's going to look a little bit flat compared to something that was made using a full spectrum of RGB colors. For this, I'm going to be using a web preset. Now, there are also film and video presets, and you can kind of look through these film and video presets. So if you're making something like a animation, you want to make assets to put into After Effects, you can do that and use the film and video preset to make sure everything is sized for the screen that you're going to be working on. Today I'm just going to use the web preset, and we're just going to make this square. So I'm going to get 1,000 pixels by 1,000. And to jump from field to field like this, I'm just pressing the tab key. Now we've got orientation here. There's the portrait and landscape. Since it's square, that doesn't really matter, but if we had something where it's a little bit wider in one dimension, we can quickly change that by tabbing through these. We also have artboards. You can actually make multiple artboards, and that will allow you to export a bunch of different images all in one go. So you can actually have multiple images all in one Illustrator document. We have bleed here, so if you have artwork, this is a little bit more like if you're going to print typically, you would actually let your artwork hang over the side a little bit so that you don't end up with weird white edges after it goes to print. And we've got our color mode here, so right now it's in RGB, and really we only have the two options, is RGB and CMYK. That's under our advanced settings, which I currently have expanded. And we also have more settings down here. And that really just brings up the old creation screen that you would get in like Adobe CS6 or some of the earlier Adobe CC versions. So I'm going to click Create, and I'm going to go up to my workspace here. I've already got my workspace set up, but it's always a good idea to start by setting up your workspace for whatever task you're going to be working on. Right now, my workspace is in kind of a customized version of Essentials Classic, so I'm going to go ahead and reset Essentials Classic, so it's what you guys will get when you first open Essentials Classic. And I'm also going to go over to Essentials here, because that's actually the default for it to open to. So we go to Workspace, Essentials, and I'm just going to reset it to make sure that it goes back to its factory default. So if you change your workspace in some way, you can always go to Window, Workspace, and then just reset that workspace, and you can get all of your panels back to what you're used to from the very beginning. In Essentials, Illustrator has given us this Properties panel, Layers, and Libraries. Properties is kind of a newer panel that came out within just the last few versions, and it's kind of context sensitive, so depending on what you have selected and what you're doing, different options will show up here. I haven't found that it does quite as good a job as just managing my own panel, so I haven't really used it that much. It has been nice for some things, but I haven't kind of gotten it to the point where I'm using it in my daily workflow yet. But it can be handy. It also, I feel like it just doesn't have the stuff that I need when I need it typically. We have layers. That is going to be the manager for all of the different content as you add things into your document, just like the layers manager in Photoshop. This doesn't have quite as many controls as the layers manager in Photoshop. Some of those have gotten moved off to their own panel in Illustrator. And unlike Photoshop, the layers actually work more like buckets in Illustrator. So you can have a whole bunch of objects on a single layer, like hundreds and hundreds of objects on a single layer. Whereas in Photoshop, a layer tends to just be one single image or piece of an image, perhaps with a mask attached to it or something like that. Then, of course, libraries allows us to pull content from the cloud, anything that we have stored in Creative Cloud libraries. So what I actually prefer to use is Essentials Classic, and partly that's just because that's what I've kind of been using for years and years and kind of what I've gotten accustomed to. But also because it also has a context-sensitive command bar here at the top, which I prefer. So I'm going to go to Window, Workspace, and go to Essentials Classic instead. Now we get all of the same panels that we had before. Layers now is down here, and Properties and Libraries are over here. But we also get, if we click this little double arrow here, all of these other controls. So we have a panel for color, panel for swatches, and then additional panels on each one of these. So each panel can be organized as kind of a group of tabs or a single tab. Now, this layout here using 2 columns might eat up too much of your screen space. So if you feel like it's taking up too much space, you can always customize the panels that you're using at any given time. So if I don't like having libraries taking up a lot of space, I could collapse it. Or I could even just take this whole panel out and then click the close button to close it. Same thing with libraries. So I can just get rid of all of that stuff so that now I've just got the column that I actually need. And notice too, now we've got this command bar up here, which will change tools and options depending on what tool I currently have selected over here on the left, and also what object or what kind of object I currently have selected. Now, as we work through this, we'll probably close things and then get rid of things and then decide that we actually want them back. And for the next part of this, I'm actually going to want another panel here that I don't currently have. All of your panels you can find on the window menu, and it'll actually show you with the check mark which ones are open. For this, I'm going to want to have the Pathfinder panel, so now that's open, and that actually comes with Transform and Align. And if we go to Window, now we'll see that Transform and Align are also added here. Now, anything that you close, so even like libraries, which we just closed a little while ago, we can actually get that back by just clicking on it here. And then we can stick these into the interface wherever we want them. So say I want Pathfinder to be over here, and I can also put a line over here, or I can just kind of leave them floating around like this. You just kind of drag them over, and they'll kind of dock wherever you want them. That's what something that's really powerful about the Illustrator interface is you can kind of move these things around and dock them wherever you want. I can make another 2-column layout like that if I want to. And in fact, I do kind of have a preference for how I lay this out, just in terms of which panels take up the most space. Typically, it's going to be layers taking up a ton of space, but I don't necessarily always need to see it. So I like to kind of give it its own space there. I'm actually not going to need appearance, and I'm not going to need graphic styles. Those are things that we can get into a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and put Align, Pathfinder, and Transform here on top of layers. And that way I can just quickly collapse that stuff if I need to. Or if you prefer to work with it all collapsed, you can always just click on these individual pieces and open up whatever you want at any given time. I'm going to go ahead and take symbols out as well, as we don't need that. Now, some of these have different states. Actually, most of them have different states in terms of being collapsed or open or kind of half collapsed with a partial selector. And the color is a good example of this. Right now, the color is open, so we've got this kind of gradient color picker with all of our colors going horizontally, or different hues going horizontally, and then value going vertically. This is okay, but it's not the best mixer. If we want to see kind of more controls, we can click this little double button, the up and down button, and click it again, and we'll actually open up the fully expanded state. So now we've still got that gradient down here, but we've also got individual sliders. And now we can go and control our red, green, and blue individually. Or we can even get into some additional options with this little button up here, where we've got options for different color mixers. So we can actually get into an HSB, where we have hue, saturation, and lightness, instead of red, green, and blue, which is sometimes a little confusing to try to mix in an additive system. We also have things for CMYK, so we can mix directly in CMYK here, or even grayscale, which is just a single slider here. So you can always get to different options with that little menu right there. There are tons of different options that you can get to in any of these menus. So each one you'll see has a different set of options in this little panel menu. That's pretty much it for the panels. The panels are where you'll get most of your work done in Illustrator. So let's go ahead and look over here at our toolbar. Now in the toolbar, we have a couple of different states. We have expanded and collapsed. So if you collapse it, you'll notice we kind of lose some of the stuff off the bottom. It's getting cropped off there. But if we expand it, we get kind of a larger view. Now, with any of these tools that has a little white arrow in the bottom right corner, like this one and this one and this one, if you click and hold on that, you'll actually see that there are additional tools in that group. So if we click and hold, we'll get the ability to select those, or I can go over here to the right, click this little tear off button, or just release on the tear off button, and it will open this up so that I can actually get to those tools a little bit more quickly. So for instance, one that I use a lot is the shape tool for primitive shapes. So sometimes I'll just click and drag and then tear it off like that, so that I actually just have quick access to all of those tools whenever I need them. Down here at the bottom, we have the color selector, and we've got a fill and a stroke. So fill is going to be typically the color in the center of an object, so we'll go ahead and make a little square rectangle here. And if we change the stroke color, I can just double click on that, and that'll bring up another color selector for me, so I can set the color there. And up here at the top, where we've got our context sensitive bar, we can kind of increase the width of that. But as long as this is in the front, we can also use our color sliders over here to change things as well. Now this isn't going to work if we have the fill selected. Now we're not going to be changing the color of the stroke, but we're going to be changing the color of the fill. So it's always good to make sure that you have the right one selected. So if you want to change the color of the stroke, you can do that here on the color panel, or you can also do that over here on the toolbar. So let's change the color of the stroke to something else, like that. Looks fine. And then I'm going to change the fill just back to white. And you also have the ability to just swap these colors too. So if you want to swap one color for another, you can click this button and that will jump back and forth between them, which is pretty handy. And if you just want to get back to regular black and white, there's a shortcut for that as well. So we can click black and white, and that'll take us just back to default. And that also changes our stroke weight to the default as well. So if we want to bring that back up, we'll have to do that up here in the command bar. We also have options down here for color, gradient, and none. And none is handy if you want to just get rid of a fill color. So I'm going to go up here to the view menu. And under the view menu, we'll find a lot of the tools that we need just to kind of change the way we see our art and see some of the controls like rulers and guides and stuff like that. And something else that's up here is this show transparency grid. So if I show transparency grid, I can see a little bit more easily which parts actually have a white fill versus which parts are empty. And if I click this button, so right now I've got the fill selected, and if I click this none button, it'll actually get rid of that fill. So I can actually just have no fill and just an outline. So now if I select the outline and give it a color, we can have just a colored outline with no fill. And we can also swap that around too, so we can have just a fill with no outline as well. So lots of controls there for kind of moving things around. For transform controls, we're going to kind of transition over to our shape here a little bit. And we'll get into this a little bit more later on, but we have kind of scale, so we can drag things up and down by grabbing one of the corners. We can also scale things by grabbing the middle handle here, so we get like vertical scale and horizontal scale. And if we want to keep things proportional, like if I say didn't want to change it from this kind of square format, I can always hold shift and get one of these corner points and then scale it up and down like that. So as long as you hold shift, it'll keep everything proportional and it won't get squished. If you hold the option key, it will actually scale from the center instead of scaling from the opposite corner of whatever you've selected. So by holding option, it's a handy way to scale towards the center, and you can hold both option and shift at the same time. For these little handles here, and if you have an older version of Illustrator, you might not see these, but these little handles here allow you to actually add curvature to your shape. So you can actually go in and affect the points and just add a little bit of curvature there. So those are kind of handy, but they do sometimes get in the way, so you can actually turn those off, if you like, from the View menu. Now, under the View menu, we also have rulers, which can be handy, especially if we want to drag guides down and make sure that we have a number of things snapped to the same spot. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the transparency grid as well. So if I want to add another shape here and make sure that it stays aligned with this first shape, I can use grids or guides to do that. So that way it'll just snap to that. And if I move it around, it will snap to that ruler, which is kind of handy. Lots of different things to look at under the View menu, and we aren't going to go over everything, but those are some of the main ones. Another one too is the Smart Guides. Smart Guides allows you to snap things together. So without using regular guides, Smart Guides will just kind of show up when you need them. So if I want to snap something to the center here, that little purple or pink color line that shows up here, where it says intersect, that's actually our Smart Guides. And most of the time they're pretty handy for making sure that things stay aligned wherever you want them, but sometimes they can get in the way, so you can just go up here and turn those off. So now, if I move this around, it won't snap like that. So if I want to turn these back on, you'll also notice some of these options have shortcuts listed next to them. And this is a great way to learn your keyboard shortcuts as you go, is to just look and see what's listed next to it and kind of get in the habit of using those. So instead of going up to the menu all the time to turn Smart Guides on and off, I can see here that my hotkeys are the Command key and the U key. So if I press Command U, it will turn those Smart Guides back on. So Command U, the keyboard, and now I've got Smart Guides turned back on. We'll quickly just kind of jump through some of these other ones because we will get into those a little bit more in other videos, but the Effect panel, the Effect menu, basically has different kind of filters and things. It's similar to the filter menu in Photoshop. This is divided into two different sections, the Photoshop filters and Illustrator effects. Illustrator effects are vector, and so they should be resolution independent for the most part. Photoshop effects are resolution dependent, and that kind of goes back to that effect resolution that we saw at the beginning with the DPI for effect resolution. We have select, so we have some different tools to kind of speed up selections. One that I like to use, for instance, is if I have a bunch of different objects that are similar that I want to select, I can select one and go up here to select, go to same, and then find all of the ones that have maybe the same fill color or the same stroke color or the same fill and the same stroke. In this case, I'm going to select everything that has the same stroke color, and I should get both of these objects. So now I've got both of these that I can move around together. On the Type menu, this is going to be all of our tools for typography. When we go and start adding fonts and things, we'll get all of our controls there. For Object, that's going to be controls for different things like vector shapes, and we have some advanced tools that we can use under the Object menu. One of them, for instance, let me deselect this here to move this guy off to the side, but one of these advanced tools is Blend. So I'm going to select both of these. We'll go to Object, go to Blend, and then Make, and it'll actually make intermediate steps between two shapes. And I can go back up here and go to Blend Options, and if we preview it, change this to specified steps or specified distance, and I can increase the number of steps here, or we can do it by a specified distance between them. So if we increase the distance between steps, it'll reduce the number of steps that we've got. And as we move things around, it'll actually update that dynamically. So Blend is a pretty handy tool. We'll probably be using that a little bit more. It'll even kind of blend from one color to another, from one shape to another. Super handy tool for creating different effects. And then finally we have the Edit menu, and that's going to have like our transform tools if we've got specific transformations that we want to make. We also have this thing for Edit Colors. We can recolor artwork, just select everything that we want to apply a different color to, and if there's one color that we want to replace throughout the entire project, we can use Edit Colors and recolor the artwork to do that. There are tons of different options in here. And finally, File. I'm kind of going backwards through these, but File will give us access to our like save and export commands, packaging files and bringing stuff together ready to send to a client or send off to a printer. And then last but not least, we have the Illustrator menu. Now this is going to be a little bit different on Windows. On Windows, you're going to find preferences under the Edit menu, so you're going to find preferences at the end of this. But on Apple, you get this separate Illustrator menu. And so you have some things like About Illustrator, which will give you information about the version, your preferences here, so you can go in and change your units, change the way things display, lots of different controls under here. Mostly I end up using units because I'll forget and set the wrong file type at the beginning, and then I'll want to go back in and change this to pixels or centimeters or something. And we also have our quit option. So when you close things on Windows, you close little, or click the little X in the top right corner. On Apple, obviously when you click this little red circle, it doesn't actually close the application, it just closes that window, and the application continues running in the background. So if you're going to close Illustrator, make sure to go to Quit Illustrator up here, or use the Command Q keyboard shortcut. So that pretty much wraps up the interface. We'll return in the next video and start actually making some stuff. So I will see you in the next video.